war, but also who are part, a part of the non-violent resistance, basically. And in our latest events, which were the anniversary of the first year of war, we had 120 cities come out with demonstrations of different kinds. Some were candlelit vigils, others were marches. There are different kinds of demonstrations, and we all work together on trying to promote the notion that the majority of the Italian population just finds it inadmissible that our country just keeps on sending weapons and not promoting peace actions, peace negotiations. That is what we ask for. I think my time is probably up, and I have lots more notes, but at 2 o'clock in the morning, I can't even find where they are.
No worries. Lisa Clark coming to us from Italy. Thank you so much for your presentation, and we're going to ask you questions in a minute. But first, we have our next guest, and Cole will introduce him.
Thank you, Marcy. It's my privilege to introduce Rainer Braun. He served as executive director of the Nobel Prize-winning International Peace Bureau from 2017 to 2022. He currently leads a worldwide IPB common security initiative based on the idea that nations and populations can only feel safe when their counterparts feel safe. From 2006 until 2017, Rainer was the executive director of the German section of the International Association of Lawyers Against Nuclear Arms. His books include Einstein, Peace Now, and Disarmament and Development. And during the past year, Rainer traveled to Moscow to meet with those opposed to the war in Ukraine. Rainer Braun.
So thank you so much, and thank you all for joining this event. It's really a pleasure, even when it is really very early in the morning. You know, we had, with the beginning of the war, we had a very, very difficult situation, not only in Germany, but I think in the whole world and above all in Europe. In the beginning of the protest actions, which immediately start with the war, we were in the society quite totally isolated. We had press campaigns against us and against everyone who was not supporting the war. And I never in my life noticed so much hate speeches against the peace movement than now. So it is really very difficult to act. And the first actions against the war were quite small, but the peace movement from the first moment on, and not only in Germany, but I think we can say this for the peace movement in Western Europe. I will say some words to Eastern Europe later. We're trying to react to the war and calling for negotiations and ceasefire. This is and was the united position of the peace movement, even when we are hearing very difficult and different voices. When we are discussing the reasons which are leading to the war, the question of sanctions, and even the questions of weapons to Ukraine are answered in the peace movement in different ways. And the discussion how to react was the discussion of the whole time since the war begins. And we in Germany have the specific situation that we have a government which includes the Social Democrats and the Greens. And the Green Party are next to the Liberals, the biggest war monsters. They are really crying for more wars, for more weapons to Ukraine. And they are absolutely against any kind of negotiations and ceasefire. And the Social Democrats in the government leads to the difficult situation in our country that the trade unions and both churches, the Catholic and the Protestant church, are quiet when we are discussing the war. So traditional partners of the peace movement were not active. And the same is for the environmental movement, which is dominated by green positions. And this brings us to the question how we can mobilize the people under these difficult circumstances, which are quite new for us. And the background of the success of our manifestation in Munich, and above all in Berlin, with in Munich 20,000 people and in Berlin over 50,000 people, was that the appeal for the action was coming from a group of individuals which represent people and parts of the society which want to act against the war. It was a new coalition on the background that we have a lot of active people in the society which were working against the war and calling for ceasefire and negotiation. And this coalition of individuals, of active, engaged individuals, were mobilizing for the ceasefire and against the war, and they were able to mobilize 50,000 people, which was a huge surprise for all of us that we had such a huge crowd on the streets. And it shows that part of the society don't want to go the way of wars, but they want to go the way of negotiations and ceasefires. And the voices of the demonstrations are the voices for alternative ways out of these crises. This was the background of the success. And the second background of the success was that we still have in Germany, but also in other Western European countries, a really great network of very different active organizations for peace. In the streets, in the cities, in the different organizations, in the different professionals, in the churches, which I really want to act for peace. And we have a different situation when we are discussing West European, where we have more actions for peace, and when we are discussing East Europe and Russia. In both parts of Europe, we only have individuals which are active for peace. We cannot say that we have a peace movement in East Europe or that we have a peace movement in Russia. In Russia, we have the big problems of the repression against the peace movement, but we have active people, above all women, which are active for peace, even in Russia and in other countries. And we try to work with them. And I think you know that IPB was organizing these discussions called Voices for Peace in Russia and Ukraine, where peace activists on both countries were speaking out against the war. And this was very important for the networking building and for building for huge coalitions in the different countries. What we have to do now is we have to go from a minority which is active to a majority of the people in our countries, which more and more see that the way with more weapons, with weapons experts, is not the way which leads to peace. And this changed the atmosphere in our countries step by step. And we are quite optimistic that with the Easter marches, which is traditional actions of peace activists in Germany, we will have the Easter marches in more than 100 cities in Germany over Easter. We will have a new sign for peace and a new hope for ceasefire and negotiations. We all know that the way to peace is not easy. That is a very difficult way, and maybe even a way which will take much more time than we expected. But it is the only way which leads to peace. More weapons will not create peace. That is the background that we unitedly call for ceasefire and negotiations, that we say with a huge majority, more weapons are not leading to peace, and that we will definitely continue our activities and that we will broaden our coalition, and we will also deepen our coalition on the European level and internationally. And I think Medea was not mentioned in the beginning. We both, on both sides of the Atlantic, are preparing this big international conference in Vienna, which has the main point calling for negotiations and ceasefire. And I'm very happy that I could join you today and tonight. And I think we have to unite our forces on both sides of the Atlantic. This is the background that we can be successful and can stop this horrible and brutal war. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rainer Braun, coming to us at around 2 o'clock in the morning in Germany. So we're really fortunate to be with you and Lisa Clark in Italy tonight to discuss the anti-war movement in Europe, what's going on, what we might learn, strategies that we can share. And it's very exciting to learn about the conference that's coming up in Vienna. At this point, Medea and I are going to ask some questions, take some questions from the chat, and we have about 10 minutes with Lisa and Rainer to learn more about the anti-war movement in Europe. One question I have, and this one is for Rainer, and perhaps Lisa, you also have something to say on this, and Cole is welcome to ask a question too, and that is about Nord Stream. You know, many of us read Pulitzer Prize winning journalist Seymour Hersh's Substack article, which quoted a high-level unnamed source in great detail, saying that it was President Biden who brought together a group with the help of his national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, to plan the sabotage of Nord Stream. And the planning was, put into motion even before the pipeline was sabotaged. And then it was the Biden administration and the CIA working in conjunction with Norway to sabotage the pipeline. Okay, so some people are saying this was an act of war against Germany, since the pipeline was transporting, or was built to transport, methane, natural gas from Russia to Germany. What has been the response of, if any, in Germany or Italy to this sabotage? And are people aware of this report from Seymour Hersh? And today, just one more footnote, the New York Times, a stenographer for the Pentagon and the White House, published an article, nary a word before this about the Seymour Hersh article, but they published an article today saying that it's a high-level unnamed sources say it wasn't the United States and it wasn't Russia that sabotaged the pipeline. It was an ad hoc group of Ukrainians that weren't necessarily connected to any military. It could have been, but not necessarily, and just some ad hoc Ukrainians. So what's going on in terms of the story about Nord Stream in Europe?
Lisa, maybe you start.
All I could tell you is that it actually didn't make that much news in Italy. It was interesting because the mainstream immediately started saying, well, Seymour Hersh is rather elderly. Maybe he's not quite lucid anymore, or something like that. And, many of us thought that he is the person that we followed and has revealed so many important truths throughout the world. Perhaps we should listen to him a bit more carefully. But that didn't go across, and the news actually petered out. It's this latest thing you mentioned, Marcy, hasn't come across the Atlantic yet, or at least not to Italy.
Thank you, Lisa. Rainer?
Yeah, the latest information you gave was the news in the German news last night. So it came over, but it was not the top news. It was one of the minimal interesting news. So my answer is always, because I don't have more information than you mentioned, my answer is, who has the interest of stopping these pipelines? And then you can come easily to an answer that the interest is mainly on the US side, but also on the fracking side. And it is definitely a backup, a fight against German industry and the need for cheap gas, which is the background of the success of the German industry in the last 10 or 15 years. So it makes the situation for the German industry even much more difficult. And it was a fight since years between German government and the US government about these pipelines. So I think many arguments are supporting what Hersh was saying. And for me, he's a great, great guy who had a great history for all of us, who brought so many things to the public, that I'm personally quite nearby, that I believe that he's saying the truth. But let's see and wait. It is a story in Germany and it underlined our mistrust to what the United States and the United States government is doing in many parts of the society.
Thank you, Rainer. Medea, question?
Yeah, I'm going to throw out a bunch of questions and just answer what you feel like answering, and maybe you could think about the other pieces and get back to us on them when it's not in the middle of the night for you. So one is the issue of the effect on your economies an issue that helps bring people out? Does that help to get coalitions with the trade union movements? Another is about the weapons issue. Do you openly oppose sending weapons? And how much is that an important issue in building your coalition? I think for many on this call, it's surprising that no to NATO expansion is not an issue that's a central one for you, and maybe you could explain why not. And then are there issues that have come up in the United States of the difficult alliances of maybe left and right coming together, and how does that play out? And Lisa, I'm especially interested in the government of Italy that is a right-wing government. Does that help to get people out? Is it partly opposition to the government? And what has Giorgia Meloni's her agreement to send weapons to Ukraine done to her own coalition, where I don't think that is necessarily the case? So obviously you can't answer all of these. Pick and choose what you'd like to answer, and then we can continue the conversation another time because it's so fascinating. Lisa, you want to start?
So
Yes.
just to recap the questions,
yeah.
I'll just reiterate, to what degree are trade unions, I think, involved in the coalition building? Do you
Because of the inflation issue.
Inflation issue, okay. How much does the inflation issue play into the role of building this coalition? Are you explicit about opposing weapons? What's your feeling, position, observation about left-right coalitions building an anti-war movement in Europe?
And then what about the NATO?
And NATO,
I'll say let me say a few words about the trade unions, because the trade unions are a pillar of our coalition and were long before the war as well. So the trade unions are involved not so much because of the inflation issue, but they're involved because from the very beginning, they are part of our peace and disarmament movement. They're very important in our peace movement. They help us with their organizing structure, and we work on that. And peace is in their statutes, at least certainly in the left wing, in the most left wing trade union, and they are an important member of our groups. The inflation issue is not that important in getting people out on the street. As I said, the main point here is the humanitarian issue, is the idea that we need to be working for peace, not because of its effects on people everywhere. And it's the old internationalist spirit is still with us here, that the conditions of people in Ukraine or in the Russian jails are important to us as though they were our own conditions. And that's why we get people to march on the streets, the faith-based groups. The support in the Catholic Church is extremely important for us, and we're very much along the same lines with them. To get to the opposed sending weapons, we are, of course, opposed to sending weapons. We don't make that a cutoff point, though. It's not, you don't have to be opposed to sending weapons to demand a ceasefire and negotiations. What we say is that it's inadmissible to just keep on sending weapons without taking political and diplomatic steps to achieve a ceasefire and start negotiations. And that is the position that brings us all together. Left and right, no, we do not see any support to our peace movement from the right at all. And that makes life easier for us than it does for you, I think. The right-wing Italian government, yes, they are in an embarrassing position. They were the ones who made all the financial deals with Putin's Russia all along until yesterday, as it were. And as for the decision to send the weapons and to support the war, that was started by the previous government. The Giorgia Meloni's government is just continuing along the same lines with the previous government. So I think I actually got most of it in there.
Brilliant.
So maybe I start with a difficult and critical one. First of all, the question of NATO. The NATO is not a part of the appeals which are calling for ceasefire and negotiations. And the reason is very easy. A no to NATO is a position of parts of the German peace movement. It is not a united position of the whole peace movement. We have very different opinions to NATO and to overcome NATO. So it is not the united position of the whole peace movement. And we have in the peace movement very controversial and intensive discussion how to deal with NATO. You know, I'm personally absolutely against NATO, and I'm engaged in the network No to War, No to NATO, but this is not the united position of the peace movement. The same is with the question of weapons to Ukraine. The huge majority of the German peace movement is against sending weapons to Ukraine. But minorities of the peace movement, coming above all from the churches, are believing that we should combine sending weapons and acting diplomatically. So they are calling for both. But this is a minority position. And in the appeal for the big demonstration in Berlin and in Munich, we have the position of saying we don't want to send more weapons to Ukraine. We are calling our government for taking diplomatic initiatives which are calling for negotiations, and we are supporting the idea of ceasefire. That is the united position of all parts of the German peace movement. The inflation problem is not really a main point of the actions of the peace movement. The main reason is that the German trade unions are really now not an active part of the German peace movement. That has something to do with the relation of the German trade unions to the German government. You know, the leading party in the German government are the Social Democrats, and the leading party in many of the trade unions are also Social Democrats. This leads to the situation that the trade unions are quite quiet when we are discussing about actions against the war. And so these inflation and the social questions are not a key questions of the actions. And the key question of the actions is that we don't want to have war, because war is killing day to day, is destroying countries, and all the humanitarian arguments are the background of the actions and activities of the German peace movement. Yes, we have in Germany an intensive discussion about left and right. The background of this discussion is that the right-wing party, the AfD, is, and I have to say in these very clear words, the only party in Germany which is against the Ukrainian war. The left party in Germany is divided in this question. Parts of the left party are supporting the sending weapons to Ukraine, and they're even supporting the war. And the only party which is in the parliament speaking clearly against the war is the AfD. This creates problems for some of our actions, and we are always trying to avoid to include the right wing in our actions and activities, because in reality, the right-wing party, by their position to the militarization of the country, by their positions to NATO and to the 2%, and by their position to the German army and the tradition of the German army as a fascist army, they are absolutely militaristic party. So their tactical voices against the war are not our peace voices, but these created by some actions, above all in East Germany, where the right-wing party is very strong and are over 20-25% by the elections, create some problems. But we are really not working with these right-wing extremist party, and we are saying this very clear in the beginning and during our activities, that fascist right-wing extremists are not welcome on our actions. But I will be very open to you. This creates by some of the activities some problems. So I also tried to answer the questions. Yes.
Thank you, Rainer. Cole, do you have a question?
Let's see, you caught me off guard, but
Well, somebody in the chat asked,
Can I ask a question, Marcy? Can I just ask them, because they're both know Europe in general, and they're part of a group called Europe for Peace. And I just wonder if each of them could give us a little overview of the whole European situation.
That's the question I was going to ask.
Oh, sorry.
That's good. That's good.
Rainer, you want to start with that?
We divide Europe. You take South and I take North and Central Europe.
No, I think that it's true that Europe divides up that way, because Southern Europe, in fact, is more similar to the Italian situation, where there is a more concentrated peace movement, which is beginning to represent the majority of the population. We have partners in Eastern Europe, and of course there the situation is very different. But the important thing is to keep our bridges down, our bridges open, as it were, and keep up contacts with them. We have noticed with the French that there is a much stronger reliance on the old-fashioned resistance idea, and therefore the idea that you resist against the aggression of an imperialist force, and you resist with weapons rather than the way we believe, which is you try to build a peace situation politically and diplomatically. Does that, in fact, some of the most extreme anti-imperialist anti-war forces in our country are now advocating more weapons to the Ukrainians to fight against imperialist aggression. So we don't agree with that. So there you are. Well, it's quite complicated.
It does not sound that unfamiliar to us in the United States.
You know, I saw in the chat that you were asking to Sweden and Finland. So I will start with Sweden and Finland. But I would like to underline that one of the most important issues that we keep all our bridges in contact to East and Central Europe. Our friends and colleagues in these countries, and this includes Russia, are fighting under very, very difficult, repressive conditions. And they need our solidarity, our support, and common actions and activities with them. These are really very courageous people which are raising their voices against the war in Poland, in the Baltic countries, in Ukraine, or in Russia. So they definitely need our solidarity, our support, and all contexts which we have, we should definitely enlarge and deepen. You know, Sweden and Finland is not the same. We have quite good actions and activities in Sweden, and the Swedish peace movement and the Swedish left says no to NATO enlargement and no to the NATO membership in Sweden. In Finland, we have the vice versa situation. The left are a part of the government, and the left party in Finland is supporting the NATO. The majority of the left party in Finland is supporting the NATO expansion. And this leads to the situation that the Finnish peace movement is quite neutralized and quite quiet. So there were up to now no big actions in Finland against the war and against NATO expansion. And never forget that Finland has a 1,500 kilometers long border with Russia, and this brings the Finnish peace movement in a very, very difficult situation. In Central Europe, and above all, in this country which is connected the most to you, in Great Britain, we have since the first moment, we have actions of the peace movement. CND and Stop the War Coalition are both very active, working against the war. They had a demonstration at a rally in London last weekend with about 3,000 people. And it's not my opinion, but I repeat what Kate Hudson was saying. We are on a good way, but we are not strong enough. So they are trying to enlarge their activities. The French peace movement is really very, very active. And they had 2 weeks ago, they had an action day over a weekend with activities in more than 50 cities in France. But please have in mind that the whole France is in the middle of a huge fight against the so-called pension reform in France. And, you know, I think we are all happy that millions of French people are on the street fighting against these neoliberalistic reforms from Macron. And we can only hope that they will be successful. This will be a big success for all of us when they would win the battle against this Macron reform. But they are active. The same is for the Spanish peace movement. The Spanish peace movement, like the Portugal peace movement, is active on the street. But in both countries, we don't have national-wide demonstrations up to now, but I know that our friends in Catalan are preparing such an activity for Barcelona, and the Spanish peace movement is also planning to have a national demonstration in Madrid. So there are actions in all parts of Western Europe, including Dutch and Belgium, but they are on a good way. But they hopefully will follow the line of, above all, Italy, because Italy is really the avant-garde in Europe up to now. The Italian actions are even much stronger than the German ones. So hopefully we will follow the Italians quite soon. But all the peace movements are active and try to work against war. And we are really trying our best, but we need to enlarge our activities in the next period of time.
Thank you so much. Rainer Braun and Lisa Clark coming to us from Lisa in Italy and Rainer in Germany, longtime peace activists working to build the anti-war movement in Europe. Just to recap some of what you said, what I heard you say is that you want a majoritarian movement. You want the majority of people behind you, so you have broad demands, ceasefire, de-escalate, peace negotiations. Most of you oppose sending more weapons, but that's not, a headline for your demands. And neither is a no to NATO or no to NATO expansion. Again, you're working to build a majority. Lisa rejected or said the peace movement had rejected working with the right in Italy, in Germany. What we hear you, Rainer, saying is that it is the right-wing party that is in the vanguard of the anti-war movement or the anti-war sentiment in Germany, and the left is split, and the Green Party is a big disappointment. So we appreciate you sharing your insights and your focus, and we in turn will share it with our Peace in Ukraine Coalition and ask others to share what they've heard as well. So let's unmute and thank our guests.
Oh, wait, one more thing just before we leave them. Rainer, can you just say something about the Vienna conference in case people want?
Right.
You can do this too, but I love to do it, to promote ceasefire and negotiations and to bring together the peace movement all around the world and to show the big support for ceasefire and negotiations from the global south. IPB, Code Ping, and others are planning in June, 10th and 11th of June, an international peace congress in Vienna, maybe so-called neutral capital of Europe, to bring together all these voices with the hope to develop an international worldwide appeal against this war, which we want to distribute to the parliament and to the government all around the world to promote ceasefire and negotiations. This is the idea of this conference. The conference will be hybrid, so who cannot come to Vienna, but you all are heavily invited, can join us by Zoom. And we hope that with these conference, we can develop more pressure on our governments and support the initiatives, for example, from the Brazilian government for negotiations and ceasefire. That is our idea. And I think we need all your help and all your support for developing a successful, big international event.
Sounds really exciting. Reiner or Medea, perhaps you can post a link in the chat. People would like to know how to register or find out more.
I just want to say it looks like we're going to have Jeffrey Sachs there. Dennis Kus is coming. A lot of great people in Europe that you might not know, but you should know. So it will be very exciting. Sorry, Marcy.
Oh, that's it. That's okay. So yeah, please post a link if you have something so that people can find out more, or attend, plan to attend.
Yeah.
All right. With that,
I have to express a discordant note on this. This statement of this conference expresses severe criticism of Russia, but no criticism at all of US and NATO. So I think it's a bit problematic. So we have to work this out.
Well, I think
join the conference without supporting the invitation.
I'm sorry.
I understand.
Okay. All right. So let's unmute and thank our guests.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
So much for what you all do.
Thank
Hope we get
you.
best
Thank you. Thank you. Now.
Please. Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have
Have a good night's sleep.
Well done. Well done.
Good
So
night.
appreciate what you're doing in Europe. Thank
Good
you.
night.
They're gonna.
Yeah.
Don't leave us, everybody. We got more work. We got
Yeah,
work.
we have a lot of work to do, not work, but advocacy to do. We want you to stay with us. And I just want to say on a positive note, this story in the New York Times today, where they were quoting lots of unnamed people saying that it wasn't the United States who blew up the pipeline and it wasn't Russia. Maybe it was some ad hoc bunch of Ukrainians, who knows? I actually see, it is comical, but I actually see this as a positive sign that the CIA, the Pentagon, the Biden administration was so compelled to plant a story in the New York Times because they are concerned that endless support for weapons, sophisticated weaponry to Ukraine from the United States, from these different countries in Europe, will be eroding, particularly in Germany, should people wake up to the fact that it might have been President Biden, according to Seymour Hersh, who ordered the attack on the pipeline. And so it's a bit of they're trying to be preemptive, I think, here. They're concerned. And as Medea has said earlier, the Senate Armed Services Committee, House Armed Services Committee has been holding these hearings on Ukraine. And their concern also is that, number one, they want to escalate the war. They want to win this year, which the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff says not going to happen, may never happen. And they want to know how to sell this to the American people, to the people in the United States who are skeptical. So that's where we're at. And Cole, you want to lead us in one of our actions?
Absolutely. Let me just see if I can share screen. So tomorrow, the House of Representatives is going to vote on a War Powers resolution to withdraw all U.S. military troops from Syria within 180 days. This vote came up quickly. It is sponsored by Matt Gaetz, who is a far-right representative, but it is also supported by the Congressional Progressive Caucus. So please take this action. I'm going to put a link in the chat. Where's the chat? Marcy already put it. All right. So please send a message to your representative to vote yes for that resolution when it comes up tomorrow. Shall I do the second one, Marcy?
Sure. And I just wanted to do a little mic check. I saw somebody posted in the chat that they couldn't hear me very well. How am I coming through now?
Sounds fine.
It should. I bought a new microphone. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead with the second one, please.
Yeah, just to again press for a peaceful solution in Ukraine. This is an action page on that with 5 points from the Peace in Ukraine Coalition. Ceasefire now, diplomacy to end the war, money for climate, healthcare, and housing, not weapons for endless war, do not risk nuclear war. So this is an action for Congress.
So we have
please-
two actions.
Please fill that one out too.
So one is to tell your Congress member to vote for this resolution, or this War Powers resolution, to withdraw U.S. troops from Syria. That's been going on a long time. And the other is to ceasefire, support a ceasefire, no more weapons to Ukraine. And please do share these action alerts with your networks, with your friends, family members, if you are on the same page. A lot of us are not. But if you are, yeah, by all means, do share this. And while you're working on that, I'll just also share that Code Pink is going to be planning some very exciting webinars tomorrow. Jody Evans, our co-founder, has been integral in organizing this. And we have from morning until night webinars. I think Maha can post the links in the chat. If not, you can always email me, marcy@codepink.org, and I'll send them to you. But I'll just run this down while you're working on these action alerts that Cole posted. So we're kicking off 9 a.m. Pacific time, noon Eastern. We're going to feature our National Co-Director, Danica Katovich, and Dr. Maha Hilal, author of the book Innocent Until Proven Muslim, Islamophobia, the War on Terror, and the Muslim Experience Since 9/11. Then we'll hear from Judge Julie Tang. She's the co-founder of Pivot to Peace. She was one of the key speakers at that protest in San Francisco when Nancy Pelosi was flying off to Taipei. Okay, we also will be hearing from Code Pink's War is Not Green coordinator, Teddy Ogborn, and Jody Evans, co-founder of Code Pink. Then midday, we have a webinar at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, and that is with the author of Migritude, which was a #1 Amazon poetry bestseller. Also, Wei Yu, coordinator of our China's Not Our Enemy campaign, and Shay Labao, a National Code Pink organizer with the Best from the War Machine, as well as Samantha Wary, who is the head of one of the chairs of our Code Pink Latin America campaign. And finally, at the end of the day tomorrow, and this is all, excuse me, as part of our International Women's Day programming, I will be speaking about the work that Medea, Cole, and many others on this call are doing with the Peace in Ukraine Coalition. We'll hear from Linda Wan. This is at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. Linda Wan, China is Not Our Enemy team member. And Medea will also speak about her book tour. So a lot is coming up tomorrow for International Women's Day. And while we're on this, oh, Jody, there you are. Did you want to say anything about the webinars?
Sure. Most important, we just heard these inspiring voices from across the pond. And they're so important. Tomorrow, we're going to hear more inspiring voices. We've got Alice Waters and Zainab Salbi, who were with us 20 years ago when Code Pink organized 10,000 women and men in pink to march from Martin Luther King Park to the White House. And Alice is going to talk about how she got the cops to open up and let us in there, and how some important voices were arrested, and how we need to be raising up our voices now. So it's 3 opportunities to hear more inspiration from what, not only the inspiration of what the cost of war is to women, but the inspiration of what you can be doing across many different sectors. So we hope you can join us for one of them, and there'll be actions at all of them.
Thank you so much, Jody. We also at Code Pink are launching a petition. This is an International Women's Day petition, and the title is Women Don't Let Other Women Drive War. Biden fire Nuland, Victoria Nuland, Undersecretary of State, and we detail all of her crimes against the peace community, against the world, really, from being Dick Cheney's policy advisor during the Iraq War to provoking Russia with, backing the coup in 2014 in Ukraine, and now saying that we need to support Ukraine attacking Crimea, the site of Russia's Black Sea naval fleet, part of Russia for 200 years, a strategic defense, considered strategically very important to Russia, and where the people, the ethnic Russians in Crimea, voted to join the Russian Federation. So this could be, a very dangerous escalation of the war. We've read in various accounts that the State Department, the Biden White House is split over this, over supporting trying to take back Crimea. But Victoria Nuland seems to be winning out. So we want to push back really hard. And Maha, if you haven't already done so, please post that petition in the chat. And this is the petition to fire Victoria Nuland on International Women's Day. Women do not let other women drive war. Okay, now.
And one other thing, Marcy,
Sure. Yes.
we're going to be in the halls of Congress tomorrow, also for International Women's Day. We'll have some beautiful visuals that we will post for you, but we'll also be lobbying, focusing on the women in the Progressive Caucus that signed that original letter calling for negotiations that was then withdrawn. So we want to go back to those women tomorrow and ask them to please reconsider and come out publicly in support of negotiations.
Thank you, Medea. And also one last action that we're going to take, and that is to get on the phone, all right? This is the Capitol Calling Party, to call our representatives. I started to write it in the chat. I think Maha, if you can post it again, that would be helpful. Maha, big shout out to Maha Khan. She's rejoining us. She was gone for a little while. We are so glad that she is back with us. We love you, Maha. Okay, so we're going to call Capitol Hill and tell our representative who we are. I'm Marcy Winograd. I'm on Chumash land in Santa Barbara, California. I'm in zip code 93105, and I'm calling to urge you to oppose sending long-range fighter jets to Ukraine to attack Crimea. I want you to vote against that. I want you to communicate with Biden that he needs to meet with Putin. He needs to put an end to this war yesterday. And I want you to vote for that resolution that should come up for a vote tomorrow to remove US troops from Syria. So we're going to put all that in the chat, but please, let's start dialing. I'll finish in the chat here. Okay, let's do it. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. All right. So thank you for making those phone calls. And some of you asked, will we be able to get this script? Yes, you can get the script. You know, it's pretty basic, but there it is. You can just save the chat, or if you are in our Google group, we'll be sending out the recording and the actions, the one click to Congress, the petition link. We'll be sending all of that out tomorrow. If you're not in our Google group, you can always email Maha, MAHA, at codepink.org, and she can put you in the Google group, or you can email me and I can do it too. Okay, it's good to have it because you get reminders about Code Pink Congress and you don't miss a thing. Okay, all right, any final announcements that we want to make? Cole, Medea?
Nope.
We're good?
I think we're
Well,
good.
I think it was I'm sorry, Cole?
I just said, I think we're good.
Yeah, okay, great. So we got lots of actions to follow up on. It's been an inspiring evening, to hear about the building of the anti-war movement in Europe. We're going to be working hard to do likewise here. And do join us at peaceinukraine.org if you'd like to focus on building opposition to this endless flow of weapons to Ukraine and support for a ceasefire. With that, I just want to thank all of you for joining us tonight. I'm Marcy Winograd, coordinator of Code Pink Congress. So proud to be here with Medea Benjamin, co-founder of Code Pink, and Cole Harrison, who never sleeps. He's the executive director of MAPA. So thank you all and have a great night.
I think it's Reiner and Lisa that actually never sleep. But anyway,
It's true.
good night, everyone.